Hi, it's Miss Gross again. So this is going to be a really fun book to read, and then have a design challenge at the end. It's fun to read because, well, I like to read, and also it's a rhyming book, so that's pretty cool. So hopefully you'll like the way I read it. I want you to read along with me. I'm going to have the cursor underlining the things that I'm reading so you can read along. And then at the end, we'll talk about the design challenge. Or I guess I'll talk to you about the design challenge. Okay, so this book is called, and it doesn't matter. You can be a older student and do this too, right? This isn't just because it's more of a little kid's book doesn't mean it's a little kid's design challenge. Okay, you can just up the game. Remember, before you start making anything in your house, ask permission to use materials. If you're using anything sharp, make sure that you're, besides asking permission, that you let somebody know that you're doing that. Okay, so if you're using scissors, if you're using other sharp things that you might use in your house, that you're allowed to use, not only ask permission, but make sure that somebody knows that's what you're doing right then. Okay, so if they're in another room and they're not with you, you need to let them know, I'm in the other room and I'm making something and I'm using sharp stuff. Okay, and again, ask permission before you use any materials. Just because you think nobody's using them doesn't mean nobody's using them. So make sure your parents or your other adults in the household, or who is ever taking care of you at that time when you're making something, check with them before you take any stuff to use. Okay? Okay, and I'm going to be saying that a lot, and you'll hear it again at the end, but let's read the book now because I'm excited to read this book. So this is called Iggy Peck, Architect. It's by Andrea Beatty and illustrated by David Roberts. There you can see. So an architect is somebody that designs buildings. Usually the architect is not the builder also. He's just the designer, and then other people build it, but sometimes you can be both. So obviously this is Iggy Peck, and he designed this beautiful building that his animals are very interested in. And I'd be careful about that cat because I think he might want to knock it down. Iggy Peck, Architect. And again, Iggy Peck, Architect. These are all the tools, not all of them, a lot of the tools that architects use, right? Because they have to measure and they have to draw their plans. And so these are all measuring tools. And they have more tools than this too, but these are a lot of them. Okay. Young Iggy Peck is an architect and has been since he was 2, when he built a great tower in only an hour with nothing but diapers and glue. There's his diaper tower. Good gracious, Ignatius, his mother exclaimed. That's the coolest thing I've ever seen. But her smile faded fast as a light wind blew past, and she realized those diapers weren't clean. Oh my goodness, do you think she smelled something bad? Ignatius, my son, what on earth have you done? That's disgusting and nasty. It stinks. But Iggy was gone. He was out on the lawn using dirt clods to build a great sphinx. So the Sphinx is a statue in Egypt that was built a really long time ago. And you'll learn about that at some point in your schooling. But it looks very much, the front of it looks very much like this. When Iggy was 3, his parents could see his unusual passion would stay. He built churches and chapels from peaches and apples, and temples from modeling clay. Look at that. It's a lot of peaches. It's even more apples and bananas. His parents look like they're going out someplace fancy. At dinner one night, to his father's delight, Iggy got a bright gleam in his eye, and out on the porch he built the St. Louis Arch from pancakes and coconut pie. Oh my goodness. So the St. Louis Arch is a big arch. This is an arch in St. Louis that is kind of a symbol of the city, so a lot of people know about it. Oh, look at this. The cat has a little St. Louis arch too. How cute. Seems like a good waste of pancakes though. Dear Ig had it made until second grade, when his teacher was Miss Lila Greer. On the very first day, she had this to say: "We do not talk of buildings in here." Oh, she's throwing away all the building books. Gothic or Romanesque, I couldn't care less about buildings ancient or new. She said in her lecture about architecture that it had no place in grade 2. He's still building. That might seem severe. Severe means kind of mean and strict. Sorry. That might seem severe, but she was sincere. So sincere means she really meant it. Okay, I'm going to start at the beginning again. Sorry. That might seem severe, but she was sincere. For when she was no more than 7, she'd had a great fright at a dizzying height in a building so tall it scraped heaven. On an architect's tour of the 95th floor, young Lila got lost from the group. She was found 2 days later in a stuck elevator eating cheese with a French circus troupe. Oh my goodness. Let's go back and look at that pictures on the other page. I'm so excited reading this. So here's the teacher is a little girl, and they're on a field trip to this big city. And this looks like New York to me, because that looks like the Empire State Building, but maybe not. Any big city, I guess. So she got separated during a field trip. Now, I don't know. Do you think she really was lost for 2 days? Think about that. After that day, it's quite safe to say, she thought all building lovers were nuts. And as a teacher, she taught that, above all, one ought to avoid them. No ifs, ands, or buts. Yeah. As you might guess, it would cause Iggy. Let's start over with that. Sorry. As you might guess, it would cause Iggy stress to hear such terrible talk. But he didn't hear. He sat in the rear while building a castle of chalk. Oh my goodness. We don't even use chalk in our classes anymore. You, Iggy Peck, your desk is a wreck. Tear down that castle right now. You will not build in here. Is that perfectly clear? Do you need to see Principal Howe? Think she's mad? No, ma'am, Iggy said. He lowered his head, and his heart sank down to the floor. With no chance to build, his interest was killed. Now second grade was a bore. Look at Iggy. What's his expression telling you? After 12 long days that passed in a haze of reading and writing and arithmetic, Miss Greer took the class to Blue River Pass for a hike and an old-fashioned picnic. They crossed an old trestle to a small island nestled in the heart of a burbling stream. But they no sooner passed than the footbridge collapsed, and Miss Lila Greer started to scream. "We're trapped here, oh my! Alas, kids, goodbye!" Her eyeballs rolled back in her head. She dropped to the ground with a vague groaning sound. Luckily fainted, not dead. So here she is. She's fainted. The bridge broke here. So a trestle bridge is one that's kind of hanging on from the edges of the riverbanks. Burbling means, well, probably like it sounds, kind of bubbling. Okay, and Iggy looks like just made it before the bridge broke. The class was amazed. They stood there quite dazed, uncertain of what they should do. But one bright young man was off hatching a plan which started with Miss Lila's shoe. There he is, pulling off her shoe. Soon each lad and lass there at Blue River Pass was working together as one. All the kids are working. And when she came to, Miss Lila Greer knew that something quite brave had been done. Look at what they did. There's your shoeless foot. She looked in the air and saw hanging there a structure with cables and braces. And on the far side, beaming with pride, were 17 smiling young faces. Boots, tree roots and strings, fruit roll-ups and things, some of which one should not mention, were stretched ridge to ridge in a glorious bridge, dangling from shoestring suspension. This is the suspension part of the bridge. It all became clear to Miss Lila Greer as she crossed that bridge over the stream. There were worse things to do when you're in grade 2 than to spend your time building a dream. Wow. Now, every week at Blue River Creek Elementary in 2nd grade, all the school kids can hear, along with Miss Greer, how the world's greatest buildings were made. The weekly guest speaker in t-shirts and sneakers talks of buildings from Rome to Quebec. Of course, he's the guy who builds towers from pie, the brilliant young man, Iggy Peck. He's teaching the class. That's when she didn't believe that buildings were good. Young Iggy Peck is an architect and has been since he was 2, when he built a great tower in only an hour with nothing but diapers and glue. Okay, so that's kind of cool. That was super fun to read. I hope you liked it. So the design challenge, you're going to create tall buildings using different materials. Now, you guys are at home. Again, you might not have any materials from school by the time when you're listening to this. So think about stuff that you can use at home. Okay. If you can go online, you might look at some buildings on, you might Google some buildings, look at some images of buildings just to get some ideas. And so you're going to create a prototype or a model of a building you see in a photo or picture. If you can't go online to do that, then you're probably not listening to this. But if you can't go online to do that for some reason, you've seen buildings, you can imagine one in your head or come up with your own building, what you would imagine you would like to build if you were making a building. So look at the materials that you have. So get stuff that you have that you could build a building with, right? So think about how you want to make it kind of tall if you can. Now, this is all going to depend on what kind of materials you have at home. So the lesson that the original lesson we'd be doing if we were in Makerspace would be make it 2 feet tall. But I think if you're working on this at home, you should just do it as tall as you can, that stands up by itself, with the materials that you have. So if you don't have the kind of materials that can make a building that's 2 feet tall, that's okay. Just do what you can do with the materials that you have right now. And then once you build it, if you have a picture, compare the picture to what you built. Do they look the same? What kind of shapes do you see in the building? Are these the same shapes that are in your building that you made out of your stuff from home? So, and again, make sure before you start taking a lot of stuff to make a building with, ask permission. Okay? Ask permission, ask permission, ask permission for anything you're using. If you're using any tools, and you could do this one without cutting or doing anything. There's lots of different ways for you to build a building. That's up to you. But if you're doing anything with anything, if you're using any kind of tool, if you're using scissors, if you're using anything that's sharp or that you cut yourself with, make sure that you check with an adult. If you're using anything that's messy, make sure you're doing it in a place where you're allowed to be messy. Okay? You don't want to be putting messy stuff on top of a carpeting, because if it gets in it, then it's going to, be a problem. Okay? And the building should stand up by itself. That means you can't be holding it. You have to walk away from it and see if it stands up. Okay? So after you do that, you want to maybe try to see if you can get it to support some weight. So this thing says pennies. Do you see how many pennies you could put on it before it falls down, or if it does fall down? You could use something else. You want to use some small things that you can add a little bit at a time, but you might not have pennies, but you could find some other things, I guess. Again, if it's anything that's going to make a mess, make sure you ask permission, and it's a place that you can make a mess in. I'm trying to think of what you might be able to use instead of pennies at home. Beans? I don't know. I think you guys will think of something, but you should test your building, see how strong your building is. Okay, so you might build it, but if it's all wobbly and you put something on top of it and it falls down, maybe that's not the greatest building. So then you can see how you can improve it. What can you do to make your building better, stronger, sturdier? And then when you're done and you have your final building, so maybe you've done like 2 or 3 or 4 prototypes, right? Those are the models that you improve on. Draw a picture of it. Take a picture of it. Have your parents take a picture with their camera. Draw a picture of it. You should have actually, I forgot to tell you something, before you start, you should draw a picture, sketch out your ideas for building your building, and then you can compare the final building drawing to the drawings that you had when you were getting your ideas together. Okay. And then in the book, Iggy uses a lot of strange materials for things, or unusual, right? Like a tower out of diapers. Please don't do that. Only if they're clean diapers. That would be disgusting if you did that in your house with dirty diapers, if you have a little kid. He made, let's go back and look at some of the other things he used. Well, his bridge he made from shoestrings and shoes and lots of stuff. Twigs. Let's see, apples and peaches when he was making those other towers. Pancakes. That's dirt. Please don't bring dirt in your house. If you're allowed to go outside, you could build something outside with dirt maybe, but remember, we're being safe about our health right now. Okay, so think about the unusual materials that you could use and that he used, and what do you think he might use to make some other things? What might he use to make a school, a baseball stadium, a tree house? Imagine what kind of crazy stuff he could come up with. Okay, and let's see. And for another extra kind of added thing to this, if you want to research a little bit or go a little farther, you could look into what we live in an area where there's earthquakes sometimes, right? So how do people make kind of earthquake-proof buildings? How do they do that? Would your building that you made stand up to somebody shaking it? Or if you built it on a plate or something, could you shake the plate? Would it stay standing up? Okay, so that's your challenge. Build a building, make sure it stands up by itself, see if you can put some weight on it and it still stays standing up, and then maybe improve upon it. Oh, another thing you could do you could add some details to your building. So when you have the final prototype that you like and you think is the best and strongest, try adding some details to that. Add doors, add a roof, add like balconies and different things. If you're really into making, you might be able to do that. Depends on what you make it out of, actually. So if you can do that, that would be awesome. And if you can't do that because of what you needed to make it out of, that's okay too. The main idea is build a building as tall as you can that stands up by itself and that will hold up some weight. Okay, I'm going to do some videos of some things that I try at my house later, so you can look at those later if you want to. But right now, go and build. Bye for now.